Hello, hello. Welcome to another live stream here on YouTube. I'm pressing a lot of buttons today. Hopefully I've pressed them all right so far. We have some fun things to get into. If you're just joining us, let me know in the YouTube chat where you're coming in from. And otherwise, I think we just jump into the very nice panel that I have here today to talk about NAB related news, anything else that pops up. I'll kick things off going to Alex and saying, Alex, welcome. Thanks for being here. How you doing?
Good afternoon, good evening. Well, depending on where you're watching from. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Good to have you here. Who's next? Ali here is with us as well. Welcome.
Hello.
Looking very relaxed in a random hotel room somewhere. And who else do we have? Jonas is here as well. Welcome, Jonas.
Hey, glad to be here.
Good to have you here too. And David as well. David Joshua Ford. Good to have you as well.
Good to be here too. Yeah,
We
joining
have
from Munich today.
we have an all-star crew with us today. Like I said, I'm pressing the buttons here from the studio, and we're all coming in. We can dig into how we're all coming in a little bit later as well. But if anybody doesn't sound right or needs some tweaking, just let me know, and I will do my best to tweak that on my end. So, I mean, first of all, if you're not really sure what we're talking about, NAB is should be a yearly trade show that happens in Vegas. And I've never been personally. In fact, anyone on the panel with a raise of hands actually been to NAB in the past? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking, nose. No. Okay, interesting.
So
Maybe
we're the
one day.
perfect experts to talk about.
That's why we're on this call and not
That's
on the
why we're on
floor.
this call. Maybe one day we will all make it there to NAB. And my intention was going this year, but I didn't think it was quite right. So the next big trade show that I see, IBC in September in Amsterdam, is one that I'm definitely aiming for. And I want a raise of hands on the panel as well. Who might go to that instead? I'm thinking I'm going to see a few. Okay, we got one maybe, and everyone else is a yes. So that's more likely to happen. But anyway, my point being that NAB is happening right now in Vegas, and we've been watching from afar at what kind of things are being released. I thought really we could kick things off actually with what Blackmagic released last week ahead of the show, and what kind of seemed like the only thing they were going to release, and that was their DaVinci Resolve, the cloud store stuff, and new HyperDecks. Now, Alex, I know you did a video on the HyperDeck Shuttle instantly, so can you tell us a little bit about what they released there?
Yeah, I found it a really an interesting product actually, mainly for the Atem Mini users, because from my point of view, from a lot of people, Atem Mini users that I've been speaking to, they've obviously wanted ways of being able to play in videos into their setups, but having that in a portable solution, because the Atem Mini, you know, if you get the Atem Mini Pro, for example, it's a small unit, you can throw it into a bag, but if you've then got to buy a large rack-mounted HyperDeck unit just to play in videos, it's a bit of a mismatch. So I'm not surprised that we've seen this sort of unit come from Blackmagic. It is essentially a very small video recorder and playback device. You can see it on your screen there as John sort of navigates through, and it sits perfectly alongside the Atem Mini Extreme ISO. It's the same sort of width and things like that. In terms of its features and functionalities, it can record up to 1080p 60 frames per second, but more importantly as well, you can put in either an SD card into the back of it or plug in a USB-C drive, whether that be a mechanical hard drive or an SSD, and play files from the HyperDeck Shuttle HD into your Atem Mini as well. It's got the same network protocol, so the Atem Mini can talk to and trigger the auto roll and the playback of the HyperDeck. And one of the killer functionalities built in on top of this, which no other HyperDeck within Blackmagic's range has, is it's also got a built-in teleprompter as well. So it is packed full of... It's all right, I'll keep talking until you do. But the design of it I think, is really nice. It's very small, it's very compact. You can throw it, again, in the bag alongside your Atem Mini. And then you now have a very compact solution for live switching And obviously you can do, if you've got an Atem Mini ISO, you can do your ISO recordings and recording of the program output. But now if you put this alongside, you've got a way of playing in videos as well in a very small, compact environment. And if you do just want to use it standalone as a teleprompter, you can just rock up with this. You put the script as a text file onto the SD card, pop it into the back of the device, and then you can use the jog wheel on the device to control the speed of the teleprompter, and you plug a monitor into the HDMI output, and there we go. You've got a nice tidy teleprompter setup for whether it be a talent or for yourself when you're recording a video. So there's been a lot, and I'm sure we'll discuss this, there's been a lot of people umming and ahhing about the price of the device, but I do think there's quite a nice feature set built into it.
Yeah, I must admit that I was refreshing the reseller pages a few days leading or after that, because I really wanted to get one of those, and the Cloud Pod as well, which we can chat about later. But I think some time has passed now, and I'm not so sure anymore if I am completely sold on it yet. No screen, and then the prompter thing, I really want to check, can you, well, you can FTP a new text file into the HyperDeck to be used as the prompter text. But what I want to understand is, how fast is that process between sending a new file? Will it update within the prompter if it's the same file that you overwrite, or will you have to close and reopen it? And I can see myself, currently I have the screen that program output on my teleprompter here, and I can just make changes whenever I want to in the script, and I can see myself getting really slowed down by using this, even though it's a nice little dial wheel. And I think many of us here probably have the what is it called? The speed editor. So you're kind of used to that,
Yeah.
feel. So that's why I wanted to get it, because it looked like the right device for me. But then I've kind of talked myself out of it now that it hasn't quite made it here yet. Has anybody else grabbed themselves one of these?
I think it fits in really well with the Atem Mini. It gets you hooked enough and excited enough that you buy it. But as soon as you use it for anything real, you notice so many flaws. Like with the Atem Minis, there's like a lot of the HDMI stuff that's not really scalable. And with that one, I feel like not being able to edit the text live and stuff like that will be really interesting, if that works. The one thing that got me excited about that one is they did mention it can automatically play from a network storage. It's black magic. We don't know if they just use FTP or if they build something themselves that only works with a cloud pod. But would be really exciting if you can string it up to another HyperDeck over FTP and get a really cheap replay engine. That would be my hope for that, and that's why I'm buying one and hopefully trying that out.
Do you think you'll put it up behind you there on your wall of fame that you've got?
I think it will be hard, but maybe with some gaff tape, we'll be able to stick it there.
I think you could fit that up there nicely. Is there anybody else that was thinking of maybe grabbing one of those?
I think there's
yeah.
two things that I'm.
Oh, there's a lot of people. David,
Well, we're all jumping in. The two things that when I look at it, I'm like, I don't know, is the amount of cables that are coming off the back of that. So I don't want to have all of these cables going across the desk. I just personally like things that are sort of tidy and neat on the desk and more of a sort of rack solution. And so you're looking at like 2 HDMI cables, a power cable, Ethernet, and what else, USB or something like that. So I feel like that could be cable management, not so good. If it's sitting alongside an Extreme or something like that, maybe that is like has its place on a desk, but it's not the way that I work. And then the thing with the teleprompter is at the moment I use an application called, I think it's called Teleprompter. It's one of those Mac applications. And I find that really quick in terms of being able to edit files on the go. And so if a client has some changes, I can like type them straight in. And so my concern with this approach would be that if I'm trying to upload a file or even like over FTP, that like, is it fast? Is it take some time to sort of learn the interface? Yeah, that would be my main two concerns about that. But it looks kind of cool. It's kind of the, I actually have the speed editor, which I'm not a massive fan of. I kind of like just like the wheel. So I kind of wish they had a speed editor version which looked like this one, which just had the wheel. So that's what I would like.
just want the the next best thing. Next time they'll just make the wheel version. But I really like the wheel on the
Finally,
speed
the wheel,
editor.
yeah.
I use that a ton. Yeah. Ali, were you thinking about getting one of those too?
It is really cute. It's no use to us because I'm not interested in buying into more HDMI workflows at all. But what I would really like to have is that exact form factor, but just a control surface for other HyperDecks. Because it's real slim, it's real neat, and like working with a rack full of HyperDeck minis, I don't necessarily want to spend the money on the big Blackmagic deck control surface. It's they have goes with the 8K and 4K Extreme. It's sort of 3U, half a rack, ridiculous big thing. But if they had the same thing but a desktop control surface, I would totally buy that. We use a lot of HyperDecks, both for playout and for loads and loads and loads of recording, and having that little surface would be really, really neat. As it is, I don't think it's particularly useful to us because not having a monitor output isn't very useful. And as far as I can tell, the prompter is going to be clunky and difficult to use. The biggest utility of any prompter for us is being able to edit scripts in real time. We generally work with AutoScript WinPlus, which is like the standard. And the great thing about that is you can edit a script as it's being prompted from another machine on the network. And it's happened before. We've had to go through and like change scripts maybe 10, 20 seconds in the future before a presenter's reading it. And not being able to do that for the sort of live real-time stuff that we do is pretty disappointing because it is really cute. It's a very nicely designed little thing.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm most worried about is that ability to make changes fast. Definitely. Let's see. I don't want to ignore the fine folks that are watching us as well. IT Never Gets Old says it seems odd that the HyperDeck Shuttle is not PoE, which is true. And Eric says the Discord jury is still out on utility of the prompter. We'll see. There's a lot of chat about that on Discord.
We've been talking a lot about that in the Discord, and one of the things that someone pointed out, I think it might have even been Doug, which I completely went over my head, is obviously there's only one HDMI output on there. And there is the image flip functionality, so you can't really have one person controlling it and then it going to a screen because the person controlling it needs it to be not flipped, and the person who's putting it on or who's reading it off a teleprompter needs it to be flipped. So that's an interesting one as well. I just thought I'd mention that.
That's true. You have to flip it back again for one of the two people, and then re-flip it again. That would be crazy.
I feel like it's the typical Blackmagic device that I think a lot of people got really disappointed with the release of the Constellations because of the same reason. Like, it gets you hooked. You're like, oh, a teleprompter is so cool, and like, it's cool to just drop the file there and then being able to like shuttle through it. But then there's like the small annoyances of like, I can't read it. Like, if the person, like, how should I teleprompt for someone if I can't read it? I can't have, like, check what we have with the client. Like, I need to, it feels clunky. And then you're like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to spend more money. This has proven its value. And you're like, take my money. And Blackmagic is like, oh yeah, no. That's it. That's all you get. And I kind of feel like with that, with the Atoms a little bit debated, like they give you enough to get you hooked, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll just stay in this segment. We don't grow with you.
I think there's not that many companies that I watch very closely what they release anyway. I suppose like Apple is one of the other ones, and a few more that I can't think of right now. But it is a pretty common theme of like 80% for me, this device, whatever the device is they release, it's almost perfect. But, and I think we can talk about it a little bit later, but the Constellation HD models that just came out, like a lot of the chatter is, oh, great, but. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have plenty of opinions on that later. Do you think we've done the HyperDeck Shuttle justice? Alex,
I was just going to say one last thing to say, which just jumping on the back of David's point with cable management. I'd love to see in the future maybe they put a 10G socket on the back of these HyperDecks so that everything can just be done over one Ethernet cable. So you get the power, you get the video back and forth between them, and then you're really, one cable is better than 5 or 6.
That is for sure. Yeah, I think we got the hyperdeck nicely covered there. The other thing from the we're not even at NAB discussions yet. We're still in last week's discussions. Um, Blackmagic also talked about the cloud stuff and the cloud store and the cloud pod and the cloud. And I must admit that I don't use the Resolve with anybody else, just by myself here in the office. So all of that was kind of lost on me, and I didn't really care that much. But David, I think you mentioned just a little bit in when we were chatting before, you were quite excited about that stuff. Is that right? And what is your sort of
Yeah.
thoughts on everything that they pushed out and talked about last week?
Well, I only have like a very high level understanding of that because we haven't been able to dive into it. Actually, before this call, I was like jumping on and paying my $5 to try and start getting the cloud service up and running and to try it out. But the promise I think that it speaks to is to solve some of those like IT problems that for many other people would be just too complex. I mean, even Aaron and I last year, we got halfway into making a video about how to do some like hacking a Raspberry Pi so that we could create a cloud project server. And it just, I mean, explaining it got really complex, and even just like trying to make it was complex itself. So this sort of pedestrian consumer version of that, I think, has a lot of promise in a sort of small to medium space where you don't want to spend a huge amount of money on infrastructure. But like for me, I know that like I hope it works the way I want it to, which is just simplifying getting freelance editors in so that as a production agency, I can manage the footage, have an assistant editor who is maybe not even on site, and they can be doing all of the proxy builds and that kind of stuff. And then it can be distributed across there. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping it is smooth in that regard in terms of the workflow between a producer, editor, and an assistant editor.
Exactly. And then there's a lot of talk about, so there's sort of two different products, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe someone can jump in and correct me here, but one of them is the syncing of projects amongst teams and the files, and then the other is sort of like a Frame.io style collaboration tool. Is that about right? Yeah? Anybody have a...
I would say so. They launched two cloud services. The project server, which is basically their project server that you could put into the cloud for yourself, the last version already. And then there's this projects, I think they call, not project, presentation is what they call it, where you can like, everybody looks at the same output of a timeline, and like they, for some reason, implemented that you can also see what the other people, like the other people faces, and like mark stuff, and then those marks go into your editor. I think that might be neat, but that also feels like a bit weird to go down. Like, I don't need to see the face of my client when it feels weird to add the overhead of it being a video conferencing tool. I just don't want to use it for production, because somebody will definitely try to get
I
20
definitely
feeds
want
out
to
of
do a
that.
remote contribution through Blackmagic Collaborate.
And then the other little thing that I noticed by trying to set up a project service, like for Europe, the only server that they have right now is London. I would really want one in Frankfurt, or I know that Frankfurt is expensive. They obviously use AWS, so maybe go to Paris or like into the northern. But like something within the EU would be really nice. But other than that, it's nice, and for people that don't want to manage their own servers, it might be a neat little
I
service.
think that's the key thing. I think that's the key thing about it, actually, because I know a lot of us sort of initially scoffed at it's quite expensive, and it is quite expensive. But so are IT skills, right? Having IT skills because as you said, it's not difficult to set up the Blackmagic database server. It's just Postgres. You can run that on a machine. It'll sync your projects fine, and the file management is equally as annoying using the cloud hosted thing or running it yourself. But that does require IT skills. And if you don't want to have IT skills within your organization for whatever reason, then yeah, it is a reasonable thing to spend money on to make happen. I certainly wouldn't. We've run a Blackmagic Resolve server since we switched from Premiere to Resolve. and it's not a lot of maintenance. But we're also a very IT focused business. I think for certainly smaller production houses that are primarily, owner operators, mostly, shooting and editing all in house, wanting to either bring in assistant editors or stuff like that, it is actually very valuable versus having an entire person to look after a bunch of IT infrastructure. Where I see it being an issue is where those organizations grow and start to need that IT infrastructure. It starts to be non-optional. And I think the cloud pod, cloud store, cloud thing that they've released is a really...
Oh no, did we just lose you in the
Having
middle
one
of
thought.
a sentence there? That's such a good build up to a sentence. You back again?
Sorry about
Yes,
that.
you are. No, that's okay.
That's
You
fun.
s-
So
you-
I'm
it was the
contributing
perfect
over
moment.
5G from a hotel room. I don't
No
know where you
problem.
lost me, but I was mentioning that the cloud pod thing they've released is a very weird way to solve the other problem of not wanting to have those IT skills in your organization at sort of small scales.
Yeah, maybe that was like the
Do we
angle.
know? Do we know if the cloud pod actually has the project server on it? Because I think it's just an NAS.
It is, as far as I can tell, just an as,
And what would be
which
also
is a
really
choice.
interesting is like they made a huge announcement of like how bad subscriptions are and like locking you into a contract, which they obviously are doing themselves. Like I'm really looking forward to see how they're gonna do data takeout. Like, can I just download all my Resolve libraries? And then like the other question, can I limit a specific person to a specific library? Do I like if I like a medium-sized consulting agency that does some video edits, like 50 people or something? Do I have to buy a different
I
project
think it's
server for every
$5.
single client that I
Yeah.
have? Like
From what
that
I
will be
saw on
really
this, it looks like
interesting.
Yeah.
it's like $5 per project. So if I'm working with a client, I'd probably spin up a server in the cloud, which would be $5. And then if I have a different client and I don't want that crossover of projects, then that would be a whole new sort of $5 a month, which I still think is very sort of low and cost effective for, not having to have an IT person on staff, assuming that's all very easy, but
Assuming it
we've got to
works.
test this out first.
Yes,
Yeah.
it may prove to be complex and terrible. We don't yet know.
We don't know that, but I will
There's also,
say one thing that they
I was going to say, like,
really. Oh, go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, like, the other use case for it is that if you're doing a shoot on location and you have, I'm assuming, one cloud store there and one back at the office, you could have an editor who's back at the office or at their home, and that footage is automatically being ingested. I think the proxies would be made as well, I'm not sure, and that would just like sync up to the other one where the other editor can be starting to cut it. So like that, for like a speed and a turnaround point of view, I think that would be a really interesting solution.
Yeah, I think it's well. This was what I was realizing during their keynote or the whatever they call it, live stream. They've got their marketing websites like they really know how to sell stuff. Like this is on the Cloud Pod page.
Oh,
There's so many of these
There's a great
select.
picture further down that page, actually,
Oh,
which I find I just remembered. If you scroll down, there's their office, whatever, where they
yeah.
have 6 of them on shelves with monitors
Oh, I remember that.
next to them,
Yeah, I
which I
thought that
think
was a
is the
great.
most black
Oh,
magic thing
I
in the
hear
world.
exactly.
It's on I think the Cloud Store page itself somewhere.
Yeah,
Somewhere anyway.
I was really taken back by all of the like the marketing pages are just so nice. I feel like they spent a lot of time making these look great. And I really hope that whenever the products come out, they look. Oh, here's one. Okay, here's the photo you're talking about. In the background there, you can see all the monitors up, and
Yes, I think
but
for
it
the
looks
point
great.
that you have that much footage that you want to deal with, you do not want to be running on tiny little on-prem boxes.
That's pretty fair. That's definitely fair. Um, I suppose the other side of the release last week was all about Resolve 18. Again, whenever I watch those kind of update videos, it's just like a list of new features that mean nothing to me, and I get totally lost in all of the new features. And then I go to use Resolve. I download 18, for example. I haven't done that yet, but I download it, and then I can't remember any of the features that they mentioned, and those never become part of my workflow. But that's just me. I see some nods there, which is helpful. But was there any like one feature you've been waiting on all these months and years?
There's one feature that I haven't been waiting on, but now that it exists, is pretty slick that no one is talking about for some reason. So they added something called a remote view, and they have a remote viewer client. So what you can do is you need to expose one port, and over that port, any of the viewer clients then can create a direct link to you. I don't know the underlying tech yet. Need to take a Wireshark to it.
I think it's similar to what Streaming Bridge is doing, basically. Atem and Streaming Bridge, I think.
It's probably something like that, but it's the other way around, which, however they do that. I mean, they do weird things with RTMP anyhow, so maybe they...
I mean, it's probably, if I had to guess, it would be RTMP pull. If I had to guess, it would be an RTMP pull, because RTMP does work both ways as well, though no one uses it like that. But I agree that is real interesting, and I want to play with that at some point, because we've had a couple of cases where we've wanted to show clients stuff effectively in real time, and what I've done is just put the output of a deck link into an encoder and push that to an HLS feed on the web page, which obviously is 30-ish seconds delayed. So having that in, proper real time for previews will be really interesting.
Especially with like 8K and HDR, where sometimes like the delivery on a normal consumer monitor can get like a little frustrating to make the client see the same colors that you have. Because I think right now the remote viewer only works with a deck link output. So then you would bring that into your color matched monitor, and I think that will be a pretty slick solution also like for cloud editing, where I mean the real cloud, not the cloud that you can buy and put at your home. I think it's a really cool solution, and it's interesting that I haven't talked about it more.
That's true. And speaking of interesting solutions, what a great segue, potentially, that I've now ruined. I'm lost. No, I saw that there's an update for the Ursa broadcast that can now stream to the Atem Streaming Bridge, a lot of terms here, and the web presenter can now do kind of the streaming to that plus tally and CCU back to cameras. Has anyone got a better way of describing what I just tried to describe, and has anyone tried it?
I can take the reins. I can try and give that a go for a little bit. So yeah, as John said, this works broadcast camera, so it won't work with any of the other Ursas or Pocket Cinema cameras, and the Blackmagic Web Presenter HD and 4K. Essentially, what it's doing, either you plug in over an iPhone or any mobile device that has an internet connection, and you can stream from either the camera or the web presenter over 4G to a Atem streaming bridge. That functionality had pretty much always been there, certainly with the web presenter, but now in the camera they've enabled the actual encoder. The new functionality is actually it creates a two-way connection now, so the streaming bridge at your studio side can actually send data back to the camera, and so you can send from the studio to the person who could be on the other side of the world camera calibration and color calibration. You can send tally. And the most amazing thing is if you've got an SDI-based switcher, so this won't work with Atem Minis, but if you have an SDI-based switcher, you can send talkback as well. So now you can send communication from your studio to your camera person who's out in the field just with a camera and an iPhone plugged into it, and you've got all that two-way communication between the two. I think it's awesome. I will be testing this out later this month as well with the Ursa broadcast. I've seen in the Discord a couple of people have already given this a go and saying that it works, and there's a little bit of latency with the video transmission signal and the talkback back, but it's definitely usable. So I'm excited to see this.
That was a very good explanation of what I was not explaining well. But I'm excited to try that out as well. Since I don't have any access to Ursa cameras, but I do have access to basically all the other pieces in the puzzle, it'd be nice to try some stuff out. And if you do try that out, Alex, and you can report back on any details, then do let us know about that. it seems pretty cool. I know that they talked about it whenever they released the broadcast camera, or one of the cameras anyway. They talked about releasing it in like January this year, and it's nice to see that it's finally out there for the camera, and that you can send back tally, talk back, all that stuff. It's interesting. All of these pieces are falling even tighter together. And actually the Atem Stream Bridge, it felt like to me at the time, or a few months after it was released, it was basically not talked about again, and it felt like it would just disappear off the website at some point. So it's quite nice to see there's new ways to use it, and I'm kind of hoping that they can continue to do that. Maybe, I doubt this, but maybe they'll open it up at some point. I know we talked about that last time, but it seems like no. We'll see.
It would be great if they add that to the SDK and make it an open standard for like remote control over. I mean, I really don't want to do a remote control over RTMP with their weird standard, but still would be nice to have it open. I remember when they first announced the broadcast, like they were mentioning like, oh yeah, and then you can remotely shade it. And like everyone was like, what? Can you like rewind back? What did they just say? I think it's an interesting functionality. It's interesting that the shading has a lower latency than the video signal. So that will be interesting to accustom to. Also, it's like it's interesting that now you like put in an SDI output into the ref in, which is like if they thought about that earlier, I feel like they would have named that differently. And it also, around Summer Field said on the Discord, it also seems to work with just plugging in the HDMI with an Atem Mini. So it gets the CCU control over that as well, which is really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, I'm kind of keen to try some of that stuff out. And remote production style things seem to be, I mean, obviously it makes sense that trying to connect different places is something we're getting to more and more over time. And Ali, I know you shared something with us, actually released, I think, at this NAB show, which was new JVC stuff. Is that right?
Oh, yes. I'm really excited about remote production and Remy stuff, because we, again, coming from a very TV-ish background, we do a lot of jobs that are sometimes like single cameras in the field somewhere, either news production or remote units for other jobs. And I was mentioning previously that this Blackmagic functionality in the new G2 reminded me of a thing that JVC have been doing for a while, which is they have broadcast cameras that will spit out SRT over the internet, but you can also get control back into them over the internet, and they will take a return feed. They'll decode SRT and put that out, or they'll decode an IceCast audio stream, put that out as which is super useful and does basically what Blackmagic have introduced in the new in this new functionality, with standards that you can just use, which is really, really helpful. What they've released at NAB is a bunch of PTZs that use the same stuff. So they're broadly the same cameras. They're the same functionality, same picture, and everything, but they're robots. And I'm really, really interested to, we use the JVC stuff occasionally. We rent it quite a lot. I'm trying to buy some right now, but it's all out of stock forever. But I'm interested in getting hold of some of these and bringing them into this whole big, remote workflow that is actually open, and where we're not having to pick, we're not having to buy into a specific ecosystem of kit. We're just using our standard SRT encoders, and like we use Liquid Soap, which is an internet radio encoder, to do the talkback, and we and stuff like that. So I'm really quite excited about being able to do, send out a kit and actually have proper control of a camera remotely, properly, in an ecosystem that we're already working with and we're already used to.
I note that you said properly and all that many times. And here Eric says JVC standards you can use. Yes, thumbs up, Ali. And someone else said, another camera channel said, first time hearing Ali's voice after all those Discord messages. And just an aside on that, it is strange whenever like you spend months or years talking to people on Discord, and then over the last, I guess, like since I quit my job about a year ago, I've been talking to more and more people on Zoom and things like that. It's so strange to,
It's been a year already.
yeah, it's a year in like 2, 3 weeks or
You
something.
did it just after I moved to the new office, so yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah,
Wow,
exactly. Yeah, we
time
chatted
flies.
for the first time around then as well. So, yeah, fun. Um, okay, I think we covered all that. So I think
One
that. Oh, go
one
on,
thing
please.
on the remote stuff, what will be really interesting is like they already have this little Arduino. I wonder if someone's gonna build a box that like takes the output of the web presenter, like however they even like implemented the remote camera control for that, and use that and with the Arduino and then like enable camera control for like more typical ENG cameras, or if there will be like a new camera converter from Blackmagic that enables you to do all that. The web presenter feels a bit odd to like carry it around with you on like a remote thing, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's not exactly the smallest device to strap onto a tripod or a camera or something
If it
like
had
that.
a
So
quarter
that's true.
20 thread on the bottom, it would be ideal, but it
Mhm.
doesn't. So you have to work out fun ways of, especially given that the ideal use of this is a shoulder cam with, with radios, with 4G, with 5G, and then all in one box, except you have this other thing and you don't really know where to put it.
Exactly.
Speaking
Dangling.
actually of the 4G stuff,
Hmm.
I am really interested to see how that performs, just how the actual the streaming that they're doing here performs on bad networks, because RTMP historically does not perform very well on bad networks, and I was always a little bit sketched out that they're still investing so hard in what is at this point an abandoned protocol. Like Adobe discontinued it in 2012. But I am interested to see how all of that sort of performs in real world use cases. And I will totally be actually, giving it a go and trying all of the weird combinations of kit to see what breaks.
That's a good idea. That is true. Right now, it's all very guesses, and we're all reading the news and hoping for the best. Alex, you saying something? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, muted.
That's
I've
all right.
done the
Double
biggest
mute.
2020 thing. Um, yeah, no, I was just saying. I will say, I think that is one of my biggest surprises with Blackmagic is that they haven't taken the jump to include some SRT yet, especially in some of these instances where it would just perform so much better over SRT. I'm assuming it's a shame.
Yeah, I'm surprised about that as well. Some device, at least, with SRT. Um,
I feel like before they do SRT, Blackmagic, there must be some history on that, and Blackmagic's gonna release something like new tech did and use like reliable UDP, or like use some form of RTMP over UDP that we implements the TCP
Blackmagic
features or
reliable
something like that.
transport.
I think they're going to call it BRT.
I mean,
Yeah.
That just has a
BRT
ring
is
to
a
it.
pretty good BRT, LRT, SRT. That seems like a good suggestion to reach into. The interesting thing that I found is since I mean, at this point, their Blackmagic OS is just running on everything. So, like, I'm guessing that the mobile functionality on the Extreme and G2 will be the same. And the cool thing that I found out, if you use a USB hub, you can actually get like a SSD, and a normal USB to Ethernet adapter, and that works. So that might be really cool to use that and use some bonded solution at that point.
That's very true. I think I'm excited to see what kind of stuff we might come out in the future. But speaking of stuff to come out, everyone seemed to wake up to an email. Yes, was it yesterday from Blackmagic about the new Atems? Yeah, I'm not on that email list for some reason. So Discord was now my source of all news. But we weren't sure if Blackmagic had more things to announce this year, and it turns out they did have some new Atem 1ME, 2ME, and 4ME Constellation HD switchers. Another catchy short name to speak through there. But pretty interesting, I must say. Now, like many of the things that we've been talking about so far, it's not quite for me, but it's something I definitely still want to play with and see if I can work into my Studio here, but the idea being they're all SDI switchers, very much a replacement, I would imagine, for any of the HD models out there right now, but not quite a replacement for any of the 4K models that you can see on their website still, actually. Those old grey 1ME, 2ME, 4ME are still for sale, it would seem, for now. But I'm quite excited about these new ones, at least in theory, because they take the Television Studio HD line and give it a lot of the features that we're really missing from there, and going all SDI instead of all HDMI, which is what they've been basically focusing on for like 1.5 years now, at least. So let me see, who's going to buy a 4ME, and we'll work our way down from there. Silence. Well, we'll go the other way then. Who's going to go and buy the 1ME? Nobody's going to buy it. Not gonna be... That leaves the 2ME then. Anyone going to get that?
I think you might see some hands for the 2ME possibly.
Okay, I'm glad I left that to the end then.
Yeah.
2ME shaking. So, David, were you a yes on that as well?
No, no.
Okay,
I want to see some version of the Extreme in a rack format.
Yeah, exactly. But Jonas, you were a maybe for the 2ME.
Yeah. So like I thought about it, and the 1ME would be enough for me, but it feels like a step back to lose the super source. But then also getting an Atem Mini Extreme ISO that's on sale right now and strapping it to all the outputs is a possibility that I'm thinking about. The really interesting thing where I think the Constellation HD 1ME and 2ME fits in nicely is the frustration of going on site. Like the Atem Mini series is not really like a great on-site mixer. It's like we use it in my church, and as soon as you like have one multi-view and one output, you can't use an external encoder anymore. You have one. You want to run some house screens. You want to run like a breakout room, and I think that's where the 1ME Constellation is quite nice. I see it more as an upgrade to the Television Studio, which we had before, and just with like all the outputs is really cool. I like that. I don't like that you can't route audio differently. So now I'm gonna need to like de-embed and embed stuff again, which quite frankly is not that cool. I like that there's the Terranex on all of that for the smaller models. That seems to make sense. It has the same flaws of the Constellation. Like that, I think that's the most annoying thing for me. It feels like they didn't work on the Constellation brand at all since they released the 8K one. Like stuff like, hey, I want to route my multi-view to a different output. Doesn't work. So now if I now want to have that ability, I need to have a switch between again. The audio stuff feels a little weird. I found it interesting that they say it's the first mixer that has like professional audio. So maybe we'll see something coming on that route. But audio is nothing that excites me with Blackmagic right now, but I think it's a nice replacement for an Atem Mini if you go on site and need like a second ME to cut a house feed or like a speaker feed.
Wow, Jonas, that was all the opinions. I like it a lot, but I think you nailed it pretty much. Anyone I've talked to that has a Constellation right now, sort of a lot of the same feelings are there, definitely. One thing though is now that they've refreshed these HD ones as well, it kind of feels like everything's a little bit closer together in a sense. So maybe we could see more improvements and features in these, and then that would go up to the Constellation 8K version as well. But there is some weird flaws in there that I don't know if they've ever actually fixed. Like, wasn't there like like you mentioned there, like there's things that just haven't really made it through the fix line just yet. But yeah,
I think it's interesting with what they're doing in terms of segmenting the lines. So like they're basically splitting off the lines and saying, here's an HDMI line, Atem Mini, here's an SDI line, all at 4K, all at HD, or you can choose between HD and 4K now, or 4K and 8K. And they're segmenting all these lines so that, and then they're price pointing them as necessary as well. So you've got the price point of the Atem Mini range. This new, me personally, this new Atem Constellation HD, I've got to get that name right, line, I think is really well reasonably priced for a 2ME switcher to come in at $1,625, I think it is, for that 2ME. It I think is really impressive with all the features that you get in there. So that it allows, again, it sort of breaks down those barriers in terms of cost as well. So you're just buying what you need. If you don't need a 4K switcher, you're not having to pay $8,000 for one, because there is an HD switcher that gives you all the functionality you need and gives you all the ports that you need. And so, yeah, more flexibility or more range, I think, is only a good thing for the end user.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think so too. And I think that there is a big price difference as well between the 4ME Constellation HD and the Atem Constellation 8K as well. So it would be interesting to see for the consumer what kind of things might fall between those two areas. Obviously 4K versions, but there is a nice little gap there to be filled as well. And like I said earlier, you can still see the old classic 1, 2, and 4 ME on the website here, which if you've been looking into Atems for a while, then these have been on that website for quite a while. Although I noticed I don't see the production. Wasn't there another one that isn't here? I feel like there's something definitely missing.
I think there was an HD model as well that they probably now kicked out.
Yeah, maybe.
Like a production something HD. What I found really interesting in their marketing is how they get slowly more aggressive against other vendors. Like, while it was not really a thing that Blackmagic rants on anyone, but like during their last live stream, there was this whole rant on Adobe and Frame.io.
Yeah.
Which will be really interesting. Like, maybe they can join Apple and together like work against Premiere. The other thing that's really interesting, if you look on the Atems, they now like mention you get everything, no software or licenses required, which seems to be like a little dig on ROS, where you can get licenses for the hardware that you have and like expand what your hardware can do. So it's gonna be really interesting, and I think they are starting to get more aggressive with like, it feels like the Atem Mini line gave them so much more power, just also like money flow wise. Like, they have so much more money in the bank now that they can use to get more aggressive, that hopefully we'll all benefit from. But for now, I'm like, I really want a 4K switcher. I want to update to all their like HD stuff to 4K. Maybe we will see it at IBC. What I also found interesting marketing wise is at NAB they have these huge posters about like, we are supporting your 8K broadcast workflow. And everyone is like, you support the switch and the recording, but not the streaming and not the camera, which seems like a missing part. So it will be interesting to see what we also get on that front.
Yeah, I never noticed.
I always find that very funny. Like,
Wow.
who is doing 8K broadcast and buying Blackmagic switches? Because if you're doing 8K broadcast, you're buying 8K cameras, and if you're buying 8K cameras, you can afford the real stuff or the higher end stuff. But I find these new switches incredibly confusing. Like, I bought a 2ME and I'm annoyed about it, because it's the right switcher for a hole that I've needed to fill for a while. You know, we're building a little 8-input PPU, which needs to have so much play out and etc. And it's a good, it's good value. Certainly, it's a good value box. But I'm surprised, like, they've lost the MADI audio on the smaller ones, which means now you need a big pile of audio disembedders again. And they've changed a whole bunch of there's still no way to get timecode into them at all, so you can't clock your switcher to an external timecode source. You keep finding all these little paper cut bugs that I really had hoped they'd fixed in this version, and they just haven't. And they're also HD while we're all switching to 4K workflows as well. So I find them very, very confusing, but I have bought 2ME.
Do you think they leave like one
kind
or
of
two things
excited
out?
to own a new switcher.
I'm interested whether you think they leave like one or two things out on each line so that you then go and browse that next version. So like, as you say, the MADI isn't in the 1ME or the 2ME, but it is in the 4ME HD. So if you need that, then are suddenly looking at, even if you don't need a 4ME for inputs
Yeah,
and
and
outputs, you're suddenly looking at that. I'm wondering if it is like
ultimately,
a
what ends up
strategy on
happening
their
is you
part.
buy an 8K Constellation. Yeah,
Yeah,
this is a great
exactly.
marketing tool for just buying an 8K Constellation, because eventually you want 4K production. You want to be able to do 12G, and you want the MADI because at that point you have so many inputs with the, we send lots of embedded audio down the SDI from the cameras because the mics are by the cameras, and it's generally
Yeah.
easy to do. And at that point you're like, oh, you may as well. So it's a great marketing tool for the 8K Constellation.
That's true.
But that doesn't really help with the fact that what I want is a 1U switcher, because I have 1U of space to put a switcher in.
That
And so it's a confusing product line. It really is.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the things that struck me on the website, and again, they may be busy right now because NAB is happening, but on the site, they still have the Television Studio HD, they have the Pro version, they have the 4K version of that, then they have all these. And someone asked there, who was it? IT Never Gets Old, why do you think the Television Studio HD did not go away? Again, it may be just like, it's not the time to pull it off the website, but it seems like they would be on top of that.
They're the same
no matter-
price.
And they're the same price.
I
So
didn't realize
I mean,
They're
that
the
is
same
a
price.
great value. Like, it has the whole panel integrated. It has some HDMI inputs. Like, that switcher is really good. I don't like the idea of having the panel and everything included, but for that price point, like having an all-in-one switcher is quite nice. Like, there was this joke going around, some people want a Constellation. They have the appetite for a Constellation, but have a budget for an Atem Mini. I feel like that's kind of the void that they're trying to fill. It also feels like they haven't done too much work. On like the Atem Mini seems to be a hard lift, but like getting the Constellation to do only HD and only 20 inputs doesn't seem like too much of a hard lift, which I hope that the whole dev team is working on a really cool 4K switcher that, I don't know, does some really cool
They
thing.
are going to sell absolutely tons of these as
That's
well.
the thing.
Like the appetite for 4-camera, little 4-camera production units is really big. There's lots of satellite news gathering or remote news gathering, lots of small unit OB production, where actually you have 4 cameras and you may have a couple of channels of graphics and some play out. And actually 10 inputs is all you need, and all you're doing is working at HD, and they've got audio injectors, and what ends up happening is people mix in another desk and just inject audio, and for that they are incredibly good value little switches. I did look at the 1ME and think, ooh, I could build in like 8U an entire OB unit. I did look at maybe the studio cameras would work for that, and you can totally see these aren't going to sell really well and get used in some very very big stuff, because they are very good value. They're just incredibly frustrating where you are trying to just sort of reach those higher, the sort of higher production values, bigger shows, and yet you're still trying to keep stuff compact.
Exactly.
On the other hand, the 2ME is less than $1,500, and a similar thing from Ross is 20, I think, is what I got quoted when I was looking at building the same PPU with Ross switches. So that's why the moment I saw it was announced, I did just place an order, because they are cheap. They're not good value. They are cheap.
I think that's what many of us continue to forget, and I certainly don't go shopping in that market at all, and very rarely see those kind of prices. So you get used to the prices you see, but whenever you do see the odd price tag from a Ross or something, yeah, it reminds you that like the Atem Mini Extreme sitting beside me here, what it can do for how much it costs is quite
They're
impressive.
astounding little boxes. They really are.
Exactly.
You can get 2 for the price, so if one happens to fail for some weird reason, you can still have a second one.
That's true. We have that option.
Very
And
cheap 2ME switcher.
the ISO is on discount as well, and a load of places as well, for the same price as the Extreme. So I might get a few. All right, time is going fast. Was there anything that that we didn't cover there in terms of one thing I was going to say actually was the people I feel somewhat sorry for, if I'm being honest, is anyone who bought a Constellation in the last like about year or so, or like 3/4 of a year, because of all of the features that they wanted to have in that. And today, literally this morning, I was setting up for an event where we were using Constellation, and it was in HD mode, and we're only using like 4 inputs, and we're only using maybe 5 or 6 outputs. So not any of these, but well, actually, yeah, any of these would have done the job that we're doing. Super Source, we need that, so we probably need the 2ME version. But otherwise, we could have done all of those things. But at the time, their only option was to buy the Constellation, really, because it was the only smart choice for the future. But I am quite confident, I can't say for sure, but I'm quite confident that they have yet to use its full capabilities, and the features that we're seeing in these right now are more than enough for their future productions. So I do feel a little bit sad.
The production I'm working on this week, actually, which is why I'm in a hotel room in London and I'm not up in Edinburgh, is it's a 1080i 50 production, so still classic HD TV, that's being produced on 8Ks, and we could totally do the whole thing on the 2ME, the new 2ME, comfortably. And that really does make you think, oh, actually, that's a lot of switcher in the 8K, because it's don't need it at some scales.
Exactly. I think that's what I'm really coming to realize. Mm-hmm. And if I was in the market for any of these, I would. Go on, Jonas.
The one thing that I thought, because I just had that conversation with someone about like being a bit sad of like just getting a Constellation and then this being released, but I do think like the Constellation, I always like to buy gear that I can grow into. The televisions, all the new released ones I feel like they're great, but I already have like a couple projects where it would be like, oh yeah, well, now we can't do that. Now we have to do this weird, like 9:16 is a really nice workflow in the Constellation. We just do everything at 4K and crop with an HyperDeck in the middle and send a full 1080p feed out. I do really like the Constellation. I will get a 2ME, but I still think if you have a Constellation, it's a great thing. And also, we don't know when these are gonna arrive. Like, what do we think we should do? Like a vote? Do we think like next 2 weeks, 2 months, a week before next NAB, week before IBC, before we can annoy them with like, hey, I ordered a couple of those. I don't really know. Like, it could be today, tomorrow, next year.
That is a really tough one. I think that since IBC is not that far away, I wouldn't be surprised if we have new models, maybe in the 4K range, or with the desktop form factor. I wouldn't be surprised if we have either of those things before everyone got their Constellation HD that they're currently pushing out there. That wouldn't surprise me.
If they release a 4K 2ME at IBC, I'm going to be absolutely livid. Because, especially if my HD hasn't arrived yet.
Yeah, I have no idea, but it wouldn't shock me, since based on last year's like Atem, was it last year? Yeah, Atem Mini Extreme and ISO right after the Pro. Everything happened pretty fast with the Atem Mini Pros. I feel like they're just on that sort of rhythm to push things out pretty fast right now, and we have been waiting for a long time on these and on the 4K one specifically. So I mean, it feels right around the corner.
When did we last talk about? Because we did the stream previously where we talked about what we wanted in this series, and I feel like what they have kind of done, because I did say I wanted an 8K that someone had taken a bandsaw to, and admittedly what they have released is an 8K that someone's taken a bandsaw to, but they've cut off the wrong half of it.
They cut off too many Ks.
They cut off the ports.
Yeah, that's true. You did say that, and that was, I don't know, was that late last year or early
Feels
this
like
year?
about a year ago, yeah.
Was it? I don't remember when, but I remember you saying those exact words. Yeah, cool. I think we covered plenty of. We ended up just talking about mostly Blackmagic stuff. So I want to throw it out there. If anybody happened to see anything that that was in the radar from NAB, we barely talked about NAB at all. I should change the title of this stream to something else. David, maybe did you see anything that popped up or something you were hoping for that didn't quite make it?
I've mostly been following the Blackmagic releases, so yeah, I think I've already covered that in terms of Resolve. Has been what's excited me the most. But yeah, I'm looking to in the next day or two just sort of go over NAB and see what things have come up.
I think I'll be doing that all week as well. What about you, Jonas? Did you see anything quickly that you really wanted to
I
take a look at?
haven't seen stuff on NAB that I'm super excited about. There's one group that has released a PD set that integrates with the C-Cam and is remote controllable. That looks interesting. I really like what Epiphan did just a couple weeks ago with the release of 4K and H265 for the Pearl Nano that you can see behind me. And also their Unify product is an interesting direction. And so the Unify product is basically an Epiphan Pearl 2 in the cloud or wherever you want it, hopefully. It's a visualized Epiphan Pearl 2. And I'm just like hoping for Blackmagic to at some point be like, oh yeah, and by the way, you can download Blackmagic OS now on our website and install it on your cloud machine. It uses only TS streams and you can send RTMP in and out, but nothing else. But here you have a virtual Atem, and then we'll see a lot of confused people. But I think that might be happening. So
Might already be happening. Ali, did you see anything else that we didn't chat about there, or did you cover it nicely?
The only other thing that I'm keeping an eye on, I've not seen anything yet, but I'm hoping that Panasonic announce just more things. I like the Panasonic stuff that we have. I like their PTCs especially, and I really hope that they potentially also introduce some more small-scale switches, like 10, 20 input size soon, because I like the Panasonic stuff that we work with, and I would like to have more of it.
Okay, good to know. And Alex, anything else that we missed?
Yeah, there was a couple of bits I saw. I can't remember the company, but from like camera trackers to be able to do more virtual reality productions and things like that. I think more of that will come in the coming years as well. The other thing, I'm not a massive fan of the company, but I did see that YoloBox brought out some new tech to be able to live stream on the likes of Instagram and TikTok natively, which I think is interesting because at the moment, really, there's only third-party hacks that allow you, that basically you risk getting your account shut down, but they say that actually the technology that they've created, you're actually using the real Instagram app to be able to bring in an external feed, and therefore you're not risking your account. So I'd like to see how that works, and that was something interesting that caught my eye from NAB.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. I saw that as well. I actually heard about that, and then I saw it on, I guess, Aaron's stream. Did you see how big it was? It was
yeah, it's massive.
It's like a huge screen TV.
Yeah.
It made me chuckle a little how big it was. But it's called the YOLO Max, so it made sense for it to be a huge screen. All right, cool.
It's like the first time I met an Atomos Sumo in person, like enormous monitor recorder that looks exactly the same as the 7-inch one.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And the photos don't do it justice, I think. All right. Well, I think, I must say that I'm really happy that none of us were there because we could all talk about stuff and not rely on the show floor here. Eric said earlier, I dare to say your bandwidth right now is 10 to 100x better than the showroom floor on old Las Vegas NAB. And I've been watching some of the content, and I know people are trying their very best to stream from there, but I would not want to be streaming from there unless I was very sure that things are going to work nicely for me. It's a real gamble. So it was nice to have you all, even on 5G from you, Ali. It was nice to have you all here and chatting about this stuff. Sort of became like a Blackmagic show, but that's okay. I think that's what we're all...
I still think we should do it at IBC in person. That would be fun.
We could try. I think we just have to be willing to, cancel it if we can't get the bandwidth we expected. I'm sure you could pay enough money and get the bandwidth you'd like. So maybe that's what we'll do between now and then. Over on Discord, we'll do some sort of crowdfunding so we can get enough money to do this. Probably costs a lot. But let's chat to each of you before we head off. Where can people find you? There is a link below this to all your channels, but what are you up to and where can people find you? Alex, let's hear from you first.
Yeah, mainly on my YouTube channel. So if you just search for Alex Pettit on YouTube, is probably the easiest way to find me. I got lots of new Blackmagic videos coming up, some across the A10 Mini line, some other new bits as well. And that's pretty much it.
Nice. And just an update on the IBC fund here. Eric has been nice enough to give us $10 towards that. So, you know, we're on our way. I can imagine the dedicated line costs more than that, but that is much appreciated. We'll spend that wisely there. Ali, what are you up to? Where can people sort of track you down?
You can mostly find me in Scotland solving weird video problems. If you want to come chat about weird video problems, I'm on the Discord, and there's a link to work somewhere down there, I think.
I think so. I think I managed to do that. Cool. Jonas, what are you up to?
Yeah, so people can find me on my YouTube channel. I will decided that all the stuff that I normally Wireshark I will just put into video form. So I'll be looking at some of the new Atem stuff and the new Resolve stuff and try to get a grip what they do and what from a more technical side. And then for some reason I'm also almost always on John's Discord. I don't know how he does that.
I am always I basically use that as my like social media these days, so I'm basically on there non-stop. David, what about you? What are you up to these days?
I'm doing a weekly show every Monday at 11 a.m. So just before you go on, John, didn't do it today because I'm knee-deep in client work, so I'm going to do a catch-up of that on Wednesday, and hopefully we'll go into NAB a bit more, although I guess like the show probably could turn into a bit of a sort of Resolve look at that into the cloud stuff. And then outside of that, I've still working on some Canon PTZ videos and some companion programming for that, because I've been really enjoying having these PTZ cameras in the studio for this like front one, and then I've also got an overhead camera, so it's been really fun to work with and just gives me a lot of options.
Yeah, I've been watching along with your live streams and the PTZs. Yeah, I can see the luxury of having those there. The ability to just in a small space, but be able to just change everything. It's really good. So I'm excited about that big time. And the live streams you're doing are great too, because you really delve really deep into companion stuff. So it's fun to watch. Alrighty, well, thank you all for being here. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I'm hoping we can do something live at IBC, whether that's just us talking to each other. It doesn't have, not everything has to be recorded and streamed, I suppose, so we can just have a chit chat together. But maybe we'll manage to pull something off. We'll see. Thank you for watching. If you've been watching, I hope so, since you're watching me say this. It's been a pleasure, and no post show today. We're just gonna, wind down a little bit here, and then I don't know, over the next few days, if you want to catch up more on things like this, join us on the Discord. There's a link to that below all these videos. Thanks to all the members of the channel. Thanks to Eric for the fund towards our IBC stuff. That'll be very nicely spent in the coming few months. But yeah, that's it. All right, I have a lot of buttons to press here, so I have no idea I'm going to press these in any sound order. So I will slowly see what happens as I fade in the music and say goodbye. Thanks for watching. Bye.